Floors, doors, walls, halls, my sidewalks, highs and lows.
Sun and wind may take away impressions left on my finger by a wedding band.
I was very young when I started, and I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. Started with a little rocking chair that I'd drag out on the porch on Saturday night. My mom and dad and I would sit there, listen to the Grand Ole Opry, and I would start yodeling. And my daddy he wanted to get rid of the person that started the yodeling. But I would sing, and I knew that I wanted to sing. And when we'd have people come over to visit with Daddy and Mama, and I'd drag my little rocking chair out there right in the middle of them and yodel the whole time they were there. So needless to say, they left pretty soon, But I would drag that little rocking chair off that porch after they left, just like I was dragging it off the stage. My dad was working on a farm at that time, and very shortly after that, he started working for planer and sawmills. And of course, we followed the company around that he was working for. Sometimes I would go to 2 or 3 different schools in 1 year, And of course, that was hard. When we moved to Conroe, Texas, where we are right now, I told my daddy, I said, please, I want to make this my home. Because when we moved there, of course, following the planer and sawmills, everyone lived in a tent. And the only entertainment that I had was my mom and I. She had an old beat-up guitar, and we borrowed another one from my uncle. Well, she taught me how to play the guitar. And we would sit in that tent day in and day out playing that guitar. We lived between the planer and the sawmill. And, of course, the sawdust burning. I'll always remember that.
This is a test.
When we moved to Conroe, I was 10 years old. That was 1949 when we moved here. And then 1950, that's when the radio station, my mother could hear the testing on the station. And she said, Mary, I think that there's a radio station coming into Conroe. And of course, my dreams had come true. I was so excited because that was my dream, was to be in radio, sing, play, have my own record shows. So in 1951, the station signed on April the 15th, 1951. And I had been singing on a talent show at the Crichton Theater prior to that. And the manager called the manager at the radio station when it signed on in 1951. And he told him, he says, you need to get her to come up. They were going to have a talent show the second Saturday that the station was on. So I had to, I was at school the day that Jimmy Darrell called me, and he said, we want you to be on the show. And I said, well, I'm going to have to borrow me a guitar because the one I have is all beat up. So that Saturday, I had to catch a big old Greyhound bus. The bus driver helped me on. I didn't weigh but about 90 pounds. And I got in the bus, and the show started at 9 o'clock. And I was there when it started. Well, I sang on the show, and at the end of the program, he said, manager says, do you think you could do a 15-minute program? And I said, well, I think so. I said, that sounds like a long time to me. And so when I got, after the show was over, he said, now I want you to go home and you listen to yourself on the radio at 1 o'clock. And believe you me, I couldn't get home quick enough. I got my chair, I got right in front of that radio. And when I heard it, though, I cried because I thought that was the worst thing I'd ever heard. And my mom told me, said, well, Mary, what's wrong with you? I said, well, my career has ended right now. I said, I'll never go back. I said, that was awful. Well, the next week, got a call at school from the manager, again at KMCO. he said, Mary, guess what? We have a sponsor for your show. And I said, you got to be kidding. That was terrible. He said, well, they didn't think so. But I went back that week, and I was on the program, and we were sponsored for about 3 or 4 months. And then I wanted to do everything that I could do concerning radio. I wanted my own show, and I'd work day and night. Well, I got my 2-hour show where I played records. I was one happy little girl, I'll tell you. At that point, I was 12 years old. And I had my show. There was nothing I didn't do. I started filing those big old 78 that the records, they weighed more than I did. And then after that, when those little 45 records came in, I couldn't believe what I was holding. They were so light. And I was on my show for, oh goodness, from that day on. And I loved every minute of it. We lived in that tent, and of course, it kind of made it hard for me in school because the kids, they called me trash because I was living in that tent. But the more that they said that, the more determined I was to be what I wanted to be. And I know when I would tell Jimmy, well, I want to do this or I want to do that, they let me do that. I even signed the radio station off. I signed it on. That was the happiest little person that you've ever seen. And they, like I said, they took me under their wing, and I learned everything I could about radio. And I have so many, many wonderful memories. And that from the reel-to-reel tape recorders to the big turntables, there was nothing I couldn't do. I thank God every day because I knew my dream had come true. Then after that, as I got older, I made my first record. I was singing. 1960, I made my first record. After that, I've made many records since then. And one of the happiest, I think, moments of my life was I was on the Louisiana Hayride. This was in 1955, and Elvis Presley was there that night, and he and Scotty and Bill and Floyd Kramer backed me on the show. I sang on the show, and the one story that everyone likes for me to tell is about Elvis walking up to me. I was sitting on the stage at the back of the auditorium in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he said, Mary said, I'm hungry. He said, would you like to go over and get something to eat? I said, well, of course. He told me, he says, my name is Elvis. I said, I know who you are. And so I looked up though, but when I got up from the steps and looked up, he had about 15 girls behind him, and they following after him. I said, look, you go ahead. I said, you've got plenty of company, and I'll be here when you get back. And I waited for him, and he came back. Then we did the show that night. In that same year, Elvis came to Conroe, and the entire Louisiana Hayride came, and again, I got to be with Elvis. But that was one of the highlights of my career that I'll always treasure, because he was one of the nicest and most respectful persons that you'd ever want to meet. And again, like I said, my dream had come true. I've been in radio ever since. As a matter of fact, 73 years, and I've loved every minute of it. My life has been radio. I've loved every minute of it. One thing that I'll never forget, I don't care where I am, if I smell sawdust burning, it's like home to me.